Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Fourth Estate right here on ZTN Prime, channel 294 on DSTV. I'm your host, Wadzanai Sansole, and this is a program where we tackle all things media and journalism right here in Zimbabwe. Now, today we turn our focus to the recently held 15th conference of the parties to the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, a historic milestone for Zimbabwe under the theme Protecting Wetlands for Our Common Future. Now, this event places the country at the center of global discussions on environmental protection, sustainable development, and climate action. Despite its importance, biodiversity conservation continues to receive limited coverage in mainstream media. Now, critics also highlight a lack of specialized environmental journalists, as well as the exclusion of rural and marginalized communities, and those that are often affected by biodiversity loss, yet they're least represented in the media narrative. So here on Fourth Estate today, we ask, what does hosting COP15 mean for Zimbabwe? How will the media be engaged post-conference to ensure accurate reporting of environmental commitments as well as the actions? And were Zimbabwean and African concerns adequately reflected in the final outcomes? So our discussion is post-COP15, boost for conservation of world's wetlands. That's the question. And in the studio, I'm joined today by Amgela Sidange. She's the publicity manager for Environmental Management Agency, EMA. Welcome, Amgela. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for always having me here. It's quite refreshing and always interesting to dialogue on such issues.
Great. Appreciate your company. Now, Amgela, Zimbabwe made history by hosting this event. I'm sure you can agree with that. And now that it's come and gone, and we're wanting to look at all the things that it represented. Now, obviously, it made history by being the first to actually, like, it was the first time having this on Zimbabwean soil, and only the second time on the continent after Uganda in 2005.
Yeah.
So what does this achievement mean for Zimbabwe, and how can the country leverage to its, to this role as a leader in environmental stewardship?
When we talk about COP15 on the Convention on Wetlands, I always say to myself, this is the time for Zimbabwe to walk tall. It's always very difficult to pat yourself on the back, but I think this is the time as a country we need to actually do that, because we did well, and we did not do it just for Zimbabwe. We did not do it just for Africa. We did it for the whole world. So what I can basically say is that Zimbabwe can actually leverage from hosting COP15. How so? Because by just setting the pace, by successfully hosting the conference, it actually goes to show that we are not just the talk show people when it comes to wetland management, but we are actually the doers, because we actually exhibited all that. And this is actually the time for Zimbabwe to use that attraction that is around us, because we are going to remain the centerpiece for the next 3 years as we hold the presidency, and all eyes will be on us. And this is the time to be of sober mind as a country and actually keep the focus. It's not time for the blame game. It's not the time actually to do too much talk shows, but actually we need now to move to action. Yeah, we have done the commitment. Let's just now go up to action. So what I can basically say is that Zimbabwe need to make use of this 3-year presidency and actually prove that it can be done.
Now, a lot of issues were raised, and after all these deliberations at COP, Amgela, in what ways are these commitments likely to be strengthened, and how will EMA lead in ensuring they move from paper to practice?
Yeah, like I was saying, really it's time for action. We have done the talk show, and let's go into action. And maybe what I need to reflect on is that as we went into the COP, just a week before the COP, there was actually the launch of the Global Wetland Outlook 2025. And if we look at some of the statistics that are in that document, it actually goes to tell us that as the world, we go on to lose about, or rather we've lost about 22% 6% of global wetlands since 1970, and that is not a good figure at all, because we are saying these are wetlands which just occupy about 6% of global land. But if we are to look at the benefits that we derive from the wetlands, they hold about 7.5% of global GDP. So these are not just, a small pieces of the ecosystem, but we are talking about wetlands that really we can derive value from. Now, if we look at some of the resolutions that came out of that discussion, you realize that they centered so much around actually promoting sustainable lifestyles that can actually, forge towards the wise use, the conservation and wise use of wetlands. But the interesting or the irony of that is actually saying it has to come from voluntary behavior change, as it were. So we cannot really talk about the sustainable lifestyles when it comes to wetland management without talking to an individual to say you have to volunteer to change your behavior one way or the other. So that was one thing that was really discussed there, that we need to promote that. And as the agents, as Zimbabwe, we need to promote those sustainable lifestyles right away. Other than that, there were resolutions that came around talking to inclusive participation. Yeah, because it's quite key to ensure that when we are looking at wetland management, as it were the whole discourse, there is need for that inclusive participation. How so? Let's look at women. How are women supposed to participate in wetland management? Talking about issues of gender mainstreaming. I know some people might say gender doesn't always mean women, but here we are talking about women, and I want to say that is issues of gender mainstreaming. We need to mainstream gender, especially the female gender, in wetland management, realizing that women, they are so attached to nature. Just by giving birth, you get so attached to nature also, because the moment you give birth, you need to now start thinking about how you're going to put bread on the table, how you're going to put a plate of salsa on the table. And that will actually push you to actually nature. So in a way, there's that, umbilical connection with women. So women inclusion is quite important. Other than that, there is youth stewardship that was quite raised during the conference. Also, we are saying protecting wetlands for the future. We cannot do it without the future itself, and then the future is housed in the youth. So that is another issue. And then lastly, on inclusive participation, there was issue of how we can include local communities who are the owners of these wetlands, as well as the indigenous knowledge that goes with these local communities, because we are saying if we are to use that indigenous knowledge, it can actually make much more sense in wetland management than any other engineered knowledge. So that was on inclusive participation. Let's not forget that there was also talk around issues of urban wetlands. Yeah, because it's not a Zimbabwean problem alone, it's a global issue. That's why you even realize that the convention itself has now come up with the accreditation of wetland cities. It's actually a way of trying to say this is one way in which we can actually judiciously protect these wetlands that are within the urban and peri-urban spaces, because they are suffering so much from encroachment from agriculture and as well as urban expansion that we cannot run away from. And also, I think we need also to consider the issue of SEPA, communication, education, participatory and awareness. That if we are to actually engineer it into our wetland management, then we are able to actually say we are moving from the talk show, or rather from the paper to the practice. There were a number of things that were actually raised there. I think there was also issue of or financing the wetland management, as it were, because we need resources to actually protect these wetlands. So there was talk around how we can actually leverage financing streams towards wetland management. I know if you go to other conventions like UNFCCC, the CBD, the UNCCD, the TRIO, the Rio conventions, there is a lot of talk around how you can actually unlock financing towards, management, be it issues of climate change and so forth. So yeah, if we look at COP15, these were just some of the things that were discussed there. I know there were a whole lot of issues, even including the bringing into perspective the strategic plan 2025 to 34. That is to actually trying to say this is a plan that needs to guide the world how we can remain conserving our wetlands as well as using them wisely. So this is one a plan that, or strategic plan, that needs to be unpacked as we remain the presidents and going into the whole decade.
And looking at how you will implement all of that, like you just raised, moving from high-level commitments to actually implementing and improving tangible things on the ground. Hey, seeing that you raised the issue of protecting urban wetlands that are under pressure from housing and agriculture, and then looking at how being in partnership with media also helps in raising more awareness on this. Talk to me about the importance of media engagement post-COP15.
It's quite critical, because we need to have to remain very objective in our reporting. We need to be very factual, in our reporting, such that we actually send the correct narrative to the masses. How then should we do this? This is the time whereby media should not, scatter everywhere. This is COP15, these were the resolutions, and then you want to be everywhere about wetlands. It's time for media to actually pick one interesting issue that came out of COP15 and just make that constant follow up on what is happening, trying to amplify it, trying to bring people to understand it better. If we do it that way, really we'll be able to assist in having people understanding more about what happened after COP15. And also not just greenwashing everything, just bringing everything under one umbrella, but like I said, trying to bring science to support some of the issues that we are raising to the public as media, backed by science, backed by facts, and not just have, what can I say, having a situation whereby we are just talking but not making sense. Yeah, so media really remains very, very critical, and I will want to encourage the players in the media sector, just look at what came out of COP15 and just find interest in one of them and then follow it up to the end.
I see. Now, Amgela, with the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund at the 27th Conference of the Parties COP27 and Zimbabwe's hosting of the Ramsar COP15 on wetlands that was highlighting the climate vulnerability on wetlands, what are the realistic opportunities for Zimbabwe to access major intentional climate finance, including from the Loss and Damage Fund?
Yeah, without really wanting to sound like I have all the conclusions on this, remember we are just from COP15. They are still, we still need to go sit down around the table, do a post-mortem, come up with a roadmap as a country, and now trying to link at the loss and damage financing that you are talking about. Yes, fair and fine, it came from a Rio convention, the UNFCCC, but I want to say, when we are looking at the issues of financing and probably how we can leverage financing towards some of the things that we are doing, we don't have to stick to say this is financing that is coming under things that I have to do under UNCCD, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, or this is coming under this convention, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and this is now under the Convention on Wetlands. There shouldn't be that siloization of how we are accessing funding, but we should be able to tap into every opportunities that are brought by these different conventions that we have. Now, talking about loss and damage, from my understanding, that is financing that is trying to actually look at how it can deal with the burden that it follows probably a climatic shock that could have happened. It could be floods, it could be drought and whatever. Then you need that loss and damage, or let's say you are talking about issues of floods. We have a situation whereby there's been destruction of houses, infrastructure and everything. That's when you can get the loss and damage finance to try and build back better. Right. So that is my understanding of the loss and damage financing. But now here we are trying to marry it with the Convention on Wetland. How then we can use some of the resolution, writing on some of the resolution to try and tap into the loss and damage. I think there isn't any actually dividing line. Like I have said, these conventions, they kind of collide one way or the other when we are looking at the final product that we need. The final product that you will need is a protected environment, and that protected environment also includes the wetlands. So what I can basically say is that there could be chances whereby we can leverage from such fund, but without drawing a definite yes to say yes we can derive benefit from that.
I see. Now, Amgela, when we also look at the growing concern about how African voices are usually underrepresented in global climate negotiations, from your experience at the latest COP, do you feel Zimbabwe's and Africa's concerns were adequately reflected, like in the final outcomes?
Yeah, like I did point out that we were second in Africa. 45 years later, we're second in Africa. We were first in Southern Africa, right? And the USA, you actually said first on the Zimbabwean soil. So to actually say where was Africa actually had, I think we were the first to actually impress on the world to say, look at us, hear us. So
Right.
at the end of the day, you find that by actually proving that we are the lead, we can lead in some of these narratives and discourses, we enabled the whole world to listen to our own voice. And I'm happy to say from some of the resolutions, you can see there are resolutions that directly talk to us as Africa. Let's talk about the issue of involvement, of participation of local communities and their indigenous knowledge. That actually so much reflects on us as a people of Africa, as Zimbabwean people, because we are a sector, a realm that kind of associates so much with its cultural, origin and everything like that. I think by including such things in the resolutions, it kind of talks to our own voices. Let's talk about women. Mostly, if you look at Africa, if you look at Zimbabwe, our societies, they are very patriarchal. And if we look at them that way, there is that tendency to have women silent. The women voices, they are very silent in a society. But here we are, a global conference is actually trying to bring out women from that cocoon to say here, stand up and take the space in wetland management. That is an African voice, according to me. Maybe another avenue that I can probably talk to is the issue of the youth themselves. Yeah, in an African society, the young ones, they listen to the elderly. But here we are at a global platform. We are saying, can the youths also be listened to? Can they also take charge?
Right, so seeing that you're talking about local communities that are often the custodians of wetlands, and you're looking at the inclusion of youth and women, but they also rely on wetlands for their livelihoods. So how are you as Emma going to ensure that wetland protection, is under Ramsar, that it aligns with the community needs, so that they can actually be empowered citizens economically and socially as well?
The beauty about Zimbabwe wetland management discourse, as it were, I don't know, I'll say this because I work for an organization that so much works with the locals, the owners of the resources. Yeah, we kind of align ourselves to the nothing for us without us. Even our mandate actually prioritizes stakeholder participation. And mostly when we go to those natural resources at that shop floor level, the owners of the resources are the community people. And I will give you an example to say, at the moment, as we are, I think in the last for the NDS1, as the environmental management, working with a lot or a number of other stakeholders, partners, mostly some being non-state actors, we've been able to actually implement about 108 wetland management or protection projects. And if we look at those projects, they're actually led by the communities themselves. When we went to COP15, we actually had an excursion, or can I say a field tour, where we went to Kasibo, one of the wetlands within Wange there. I think you heard about it. It's quite a popular wetland now. And some people were actually quick to judge, to say, look here, Emma, you've brought us to this wetland, just, stage managed for COP15. We labored to explain to people, to say, really, how could you have a stage managed such a project just for COP15? This is a 2019 project, and the people, they are saying it. And the beauty about Kasibo, we were not there to tell the story to the delegates. It was the owners of the project that were telling the story to the delegates. And just one quick thing that comes to mind is to say, when communities begin to derive value out of their natural resource, they take pride. Just last week, we were notified by the community, by the project members from Kasibo, to say, look here, when you came for COP, there was already sugar beans that were awaiting harvest. We actually had to stop them, to say, please don't harvest, because they wanted to harvest within that very week when COP was running and when we wanted to bring delegates. We just had to stop them for a day, to say, just accommodate the people, to appreciate that there's a harvest. And out of that harvest, they've been able to realize excess that they've gone on to donate to a local hospital. So these are communities now that have seen the value of protecting their own natural resource, benefiting from from it internally, and being able to actually, assist where there is a deficit. So what we'll do as the agents, we are not going to move away from how we've been implementing this kind of arrangement, but we are just going to enhance, we are going to strengthen the approach, because it's working. And we are saying, we are going to put the youth at the lead, we are going to put women in the lead. And like I did point out, I don't have to go back to what I just said about women. If you put women in such local arrangements, especially on natural resources, the success is always, assured.
Right. Now, Amgela, we are running out of time, but given that Emma is, wetlands are actually legally protected by, the environmental management, is there a plan to strike a balance between meeting housing demands and protecting critical wetlands?
Yeah, that is given. That is given, because even if we look at how COP15 has put it, and some of the resolutions that we have, among them, there is still room for us to actually, gazette more wetlands as Ramsar sites. And already people are have already picked some that are actually obvious. Let me just give you an example of Kariba Dam. Why are we not gazetting it as a wetland, as a Ramsar site? And this also goes to show that this is time now to impress on transformative pathways towards wetland management. Let's talk about impressing on how we can integrate wetland management and development. Some people, they usually think that wetlands, they become obstacles of development, not the other way around. Actually, wetlands are actually an enabler of sustainable development. For as long as the management or the protection of the wetlands is integrated in the development. So that is one transformative pathway that can assist us to strike the balance. And also, we've talked about inclusion of the owners of the resources. It can actually assist us to strike a balance. So I think those are just some of the few things that we can actually concentrate on.
All right, and then seeing that the goal is to maintain the momentum post COP15, Amgela, let's look at social media. And it's obviously a key source of information for most of the Zimbabweans. And you find that there are some people who probably really didn't even understand what was happening. So how is Emma leveraging platforms like X, like WhatsApp, Facebook, the likes, to make sure that we maintain this momentum and to actually give out more information?
It might not be Emma alone. Emma really will remain with its oversight role of regulation. Right. We are also there into the awareness, feeding into the SEPA that I talked about, as well as just the support system in wetland management. But it goes to say that all of us, let's keep on talking. before COP15, everybody was talking. There were so many social media platforms from different organizations and individuals. Everybody was talking about wetlands. After COP15, we then kept quiet without realizing that COP15 was just a phase, but the bulk of the work is supposed to happen post COP15, and which is now an encouragement to say, can we all use our different social media handles to keep the momentum, advocates to change, to bring about the mindset change that I was talking about. And as Emma, we will play our part. We are already on X, we are on Facebook, we are on TikTok, we are on YouTube, we are on LinkedIn. So basically all the other basic social media angles, we are there. And we also have a very vibrant, user-friendly website that you can visit anytime. And we'll be logging in and putting more information on social media. And not just to leave out, every Wednesday, follow us. We have what we call Wetland Wednesdays, where every Wednesdays we talk about wetlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's something for you if you would like to to get more information and join the conversation post COP15. But we've come to the end of our show. Thank you very much, Angela, for making time to come and talk about this with us on Fourth Estate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. I've been your host, Wetlands Sansole, and we were just reviewing all the discussions that we had and what it means for Zimbabwe post COP15. So thank you very much for joining the conversation. I was with Angela Sitange, the publicity manager from Environmental Management Agency. Thank you very much. Pleasant viewing.